What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 305. My name is Marshall. I am one of your Limited Resources, and joining me, fresh off of Monday Night Football, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how goes, sir?
It's going pretty well. Days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer, but I'll survive.
Is it snowing there yet? I know you probably get asked that, but...
It is not snowing yet, but our traditional weekly basketball game, which I even mentioned last week, is probably not long for this world, at least not outside. It's dark at 6:30 now.
Yeah, you're going to have to find a different, a more warm place to play, I think. And the last time I was in Denver was for the GP, where it was just pelting down snow the whole time, though. I'm told it's not actually like that most of the time over there.
No.
Yeah, which is probably why you were okay moving there. All right, we're coming right off of our set review shows for Battle for Zendikar. And I know, Luis, you've been drafting quite a bit, and I've got a few drafts in myself, and we're ready to do some first impressions of Battle for Zendikar. Before we do, I want to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Fantastic place to get a whole bunch of awesome free content. You know, that's what drew me in originally to Channel Fireball, was I could go there and they had sweet content by some of the best players in the world, and it was all for free. I didn't have to do any stupid subscription-y thing or sign up or whatever. I just went there. I could watch videos. I could listen to podcasts. I could read articles, and it was all there every single day. New stuff. On channelfireball.com. But, while you're there, you also tend to wander over to the store a little bit and go, oh, maybe I need to buy something. Let's check out this store. And it turns out full selection of singles, sealed product, all that kind of stuff. Anything you might need, you're going to find it at channelfireball.com. Also, we're about a month out from GPCTAC. You can find information at gpctac.com. It's legacy. So maybe not your wheelhouse since you're listening to Limited Resources, but hey, maybe it is. And if you want to come out and play, there's an awesome two-sided Delver of Secrets playmat that you can get for coming out and playing the tournament. We're going to be giving away one of those on the show here shortly. Probably the next show, I suppose we'll pick out who it is. Now, we're not going to send that one out until the GP weekend, just because we want to make sure that everybody gets them at the same time. But you will have one reserved for you and sent even if you can't make it. Those are eligible for everybody who's on our Patreon. Now, our Patreon is a way that you can give to the show directly. You get some cool perks for it. You can unlock some bonus stuff. You get a thank you card with maybe two of your favorite mascots on it just for signing up. And you can do that at patreon.com/limited resources. Another thing that you get for being a patron, besides being put into the drawings and all that kind of stuff, is you can ask questions that we will answer on the show. Now, what I do is for patrons only on the Patreon, there's a thread, and you can put up your questions there, and I go through and pick out one good question per week. And there's too many to do all of them, but you at least get in that small pool. And the Patreon question of the week for this week comes from Sven Haman, who I believe has asked one before. Name looks familiar. He's got a good question here, Luis, and certainly relevant to our show this week. He says, do you have any tips for the first draft in a new format? I usually do decently well at the sealed pre-release of any given set, having listened to the set review and just generally playing good Magic. However, my first draft of a new set is usually a train wreck. I have a hard time understanding which directions I could go and what might be open, and I end up with a deck that consists of some cards I consider to be good and sealed. In a set such as Battle for Zendikar, that's about archetypes and synergy, such a deck just doesn't get there. Other people don't seem to have this problem and adapt to the new format more quickly, drafting streamlined decks in their first draft already. How can I get better at this? Thank you, Sven, for the question. And, one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up was, it was topical to what we're going to be talking about on the show, which is our first impressions, which is going to cover a lot of, Luis and I's first drafts. But, Sven, you're not alone. I think most people feel this way when they sit down to draft. And, I think that's a lot of the reason why people come listen to the podcast and try to keep up on this type of stuff, is that it is daunting. It is intimidating to sit down. And you listen to the set review and, you talk with your friends a little bit, you get an idea for what's going on with the set. But then when you're staring down 14 cards and you have to pick one and, the clock's ticking on you, it can get a little bit overwhelming and a little bit daunting. Luis, is there anything that comes to mind for you? For when you first sit down at a new draft that you actually have never drafted before?
Well, one of the things I actually really like doing is taking the kind of more interesting cards or the more build around me type cards, just because, especially if they're of higher rarity. When I first start a format, I just want to start learning these things. And yeah, I mean, it's not that difficult to figure out, like, that a card, like from Origins Reeve Soul was going to be good, or Fighter Impulse was going to be good, or like in this set, a card like Complete Disregard or Touch of the Void or just fine removal spells. That's not that interesting, though. I would rather try to take a card that gives me a payoff, just to try to start learning what those cards, how they function. That does lead to sometimes just not getting there completely, because sometimes it'll be a format like Origins where the build arounds don't really work. I just don't think that those are something you want to do. But Battle for Zendikar does have a lot of well supported build arounds, and if you wanted to open your first Battle for Zendikar draft and then take like it's a bunch of ingesters and ways to get them through, and processors, like that's a cool way to approach it. I don't worry too much about my results in the first draft. The first couple drafts are all about learning. They're less about like how can I 3-0 this draft, because I'd rather 3-0 the drafts that I really care about than 3-0 my first draft when no one knows what's going on. So right, I tend not to actually take that many safe picks in my first couple drafts.
Yeah, one thing that I've learned, and it seems so simple, but it did take me a while to really just come to terms with, is R&D and the design team and stuff that puts these cards out. I mean, they put on the cards in many of the strategies that you're supposed to do. And they do that in the form of the sort of headliner mechanics for the set. And it's easy to get into the trap of looking at individual cards and being like, well, do these work? What's going on? But what I like to do is similar to what Luis does. And you mentioned it partly as well, Luis, is to take one of the strategies that it seems like that they've pushed. For example, allies, right? An ingest deck, maybe colorless, if we've seen enough things for colorless, and go hard in that direction. It's a little riskier. It is the type of thing where you're really kind of taking one for the team, so to speak, by drafting a deck that maybe isn't that great, but you're going to do it all the way. And I pretty consistently do this in my first few drafts. I will look at my opening pack, and if there's a good ally in it, I'll take the ally, and I'll just be like, I'm drafting every ally I see. I am going to push hard for this ally deck, and we're going to see what it's made of. And I'll play the crappy allies, to see if it's just a matter of how many allies do I have. And I'll run it out there. And you learn a lot by doing that. You'll figure it out quickly that, this is how this ally deck works. And, the power level, of course, is going to be determined by which cards you end up getting for it. But, that's a big deal to be able to kind of checkbox next to allies and say, I have a fundamental grasp on what this deck's doing and how it works. You'll learn things like in Battle for Zendikar, the allies are a little different. When they enter the battlefield, they give the thing to all your creatures. And we're kind of used to allies being specific to more allies. And what having more allies does in your deck is it gives you the ability to trigger these things multiple times. But until you actually play with it, that might not be obvious to you that sometimes you just play one of these allies because its one-time effect is worth it, considering that it goes on all your creatures. And, by pushing hard in that direction, you start to figure out, well, you know what? I actually don't need all allies. I can substitute some of these bad ones in for maybe a good landfall creature or just a solid body or a curve pick or something like that. And you'll start to work through these things. And so when you sit down, and you open up your pack, I would be looking for one of the sort of tailor-made archetypes that R&D put in our hands to start off with, and push hard in that direction and see where it takes you. And I think that gives you a little bit more guidance than you'd normally have when you sit down, and you're going to learn something that's going to be relevant to future drafts as well. Speaking of first drafts, Luis, it is time for us to start cracking some packs. We're going to do, 2, maybe 3 crack-a-packs on the show. I love starting off these first impression sets with multiple crack-a-packs because they put us in that same seat the seat that Sven was in, right? It's like, we don't, this will be, representing some of our first drafts here on the show as well. And so we get to go along with that with you and kind of talk you through it. This
won't be as good as the Crack-a-Pack from last show, but we'll allow it.
That was very popular, Crack-a-Pack. Although a lot of dissension about what exactly the first pick was. Hopefully we come to...
I got what Razor Claw Bears did wrong. It's, an understandable mistake.
So this first pack actually was given to me at the pre-release by Ryan Key. Very nice guy. Played against him. He handed me a rather savage loss in one of the pre-releases, but I did have a chance to chat with Ryan afterwards, and he's a listener of the show. And he's from Mount Lake Terrace, which is close to where I live, just a couple of cities over. But one thing that I did have a chance to talk to Ryan about, and I wanted to bring up on the show, is that Ryan works with local youth shelters here, youth homeless shelters. And I asked him we were talking about it because he mentioned to me that one thing that can be really helpful is if the children that are in the youth shelters can get magic cards. And sometimes that's just a matter of getting the cards to them. It's not like they need a bunch of boxes of sealed product or whatever. They just want cards to play with. And, for a lot of us limited players, you do a draft, you take the rares, somebody wins the rares, whatever. And the commons kind of go away. Not very many of them make it to constructed playable. And once you're done drafting them, there's not a whole lot of use for them. And if you're anything like me, they kind of pile up, and you have to do something with them. And, I asked him, because he was telling me a place I could take them or help the local shop take them. But I asked him, I wanted to read it, about it on the show. And I said, well, what should he do? And what he recommended was that you Google youth homeless shelter for your area. So put in the city that you live. And you'll find one in most cities that exists. And, you can just usually just drop the cards off. You can just pile up the commons from your draft group or even from your local store and just put them in a box. And then when you have a little bit of time on a Saturday or whatever, just roll down there and say, hey, these are for the kids. And they'll usually take them. And apparently they do really good because, when you're in that tough position, being a young person and not having a place to stay, something small like that can go a long way to kind of distract you and make sure that you still stay young, at least for a little bit. So, I do encourage you to do that. It's a nice thing to do that doesn't really cost you any money either. Yeah. And thank you, Ryan, for the advice as well.
Very good idea.
Yeah. All right. Let's crack this bad boy. Let's see what we got. Now, I do want to remind you that I give away all of these cards, that we open up in the Cracker Packs, and we do it about once every month. It kind of depends. Like the set review shows kind of postpone it because we don't do Cracker Packs for those. And I also include some limited resources sleeves, a button, a sticker, and almost out of t-shirts, but I'll throw in something else cool. And I call it just like a LR gift pack, and that goes out to a random patron. So maybe we'll open something sweet in one of these packs and get to give away something awesome. Royal Mage's Trick is first, Luis. It's a 3 and a blue instant. It's got Converge. Creatures your opponents control get -X/-0 until end of turn, where X is the number of colors spent to cast it, and you get to draw a card.
I like Royal Mage's Trick more than I have previous iterations of this effect because it works when you're attacking as well, since it just shrinks their team regardless. It's not like it only works on defense like Hydrolash, which was in Origins, but it's not a card I'm going to take early, much like most Converge cards, and overall it's mostly filler. It's one of those cards that doesn't fill a slot of removal or creatures, so it's kind of hard to fit it into a lot of decks.
Is there a deck that you would really like a Royal Mage's Trick in, against, where you would be willing to bring it in out of the board?
Not
or maybe
really.
A card, I've seen a couple.
It's good against Resolute Blademaster, the 2/2 that gives all your allies double strike, or rather gives all your creatures double strike when you play it or another ally. Just because -X/-0 is really good against double strike. Just their 2/2s become 0/2s with double strike, and that doesn't do much. But in general, this is more like if you've got a deck that it can generate a lot of colors of mana and has a decent amount of creatures, maybe you'd want it, but it's not much of a sideboard card.
Right. Dutiful Return. Similar, it's 3 and a black sorcery, return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. It's similar in the sense that 4 mana kind of draws you a card here, but ultimately doesn't make the cut a lot of times.
No, this was kind of a filler card back in Cons of Tarkir when we saw it. Actually, exact same card, and it's still a filler. So
right. Core Castigator, nice little aggressive 2-drop, 1 and a white for a 3/1. Can't be blocked by Eldrazi Scions. It's also an ally.
Yeah, Core Cascadator is a fine card. It fills out your curve nicely in the ally decks. Having 3 power is pretty good, especially, again, with cards like Resolute Blademaster or any of the allies that kind of make your team better, like Fire Mantle Mage, which makes them hard to block, that sort of thing. But again, this is just not even close to a card I would be happy to first pick.
Right. Reckless Cohort is similar, 1 and a red for a 2/2 human warrior ally, and it attacks each combat if able unless you control another ally. So it's a 2 mana 2/2 ally with a drawback.
Yeah, this card is better than it looks. It's just because it is an ally, which does help for the ally decks. It's a cheap ally, and then in an ally deck, it doesn't have the drawback as often. But still, it's worse than Core Castigator.
Yeah, for sure. Geyserfield Stalker. Here's your kind of 5-drop that gets left and falls through the cracks. Usually, it's 4 and a black for a 3/2 elemental. It's got Menace. So it can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, and it has landfall. It gets +2/+2. Not a bad beater, but it's just tough because on defense it really is a liability at 5 mana for a 3/2.
Yeah, this is not the kind of card that you're super happy about, and if you want this, you're going to be able to get one.
Snapping Gnarlid. I've taken a lot of damage from Snapping Gnarlid so far.
Yes, Snapping Gnarlid is a 1 and a green for a 2/2 and has landfall +1/+1. In an aggressive deck, this is very similar to a 2-mana 3/3, that can't block, or can't block well. At least you can still block with it as a 2/2. But I like Snapping Gnarlid a lot. I actually, one of the first decks I had was this like green-white kind of controller deck with a bunch of expensive spells, but also just had 2 Snapping Gnarlids, and sometimes you would just draw Snapping Gnarlid in a 3-drop and just beat your opponent down. So the card does a lot of work by itself. This is the front runner so far.
Yeah, I've definitely got respect for Snapping Gnarlid, a very, very solid 2-drop. Evolving Wilds is next.
Evolving Wilds is fairly important. It's good in the landfall deck and it's good in the converge deck, but I don't want to move into it. Pick one.
Eldrazi Sky Spawner. There's a nice one.
Well, now we have a runaway favorite. Eldrazi Sky Spawner might just be the best common overall. It's 2 and a blue for 2/1 flying, and it gives you an Eldrazi Scion. Like, it's Sandstep Outcast, but the one you want to have flying has flying, and the other one actually has more of an ability now. You can sacrifice Scion for a mana. So Eldrazi Sky Spawner is just an awesome card.
Yeah, I've been a huge fan of it. It has certainly delivered. Hedron Blade. No, it's a colorless 2 to equip. It's an equipment, obviously. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever the equipped creature becomes blocked by 1 or more colorless creatures, it gains Death Touch until end of turn.
Yeah, one of the cards I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah, I have not found a home for Hedron Blade. Skitterskin. I'm curious what you think about this one. I've had a chance to play against, but not with Skitterskin yet. It's a 3 and a black for a 4/3. It's got Devoid. It cannot block. And it has 1 and a black regenerate it, but you can only do this if you control another colorless creature.
I like Skitterskin in the red-black Devoid deck. I don't actually even like it that much in the blue-black Devoid deck, just because it's just not very defensive, and the blue-black deck is a little more worried about setting up defenses and chipping in with one of its ingesters. But in the black-red deck, it's good. The problem is that makes it more of a 2-color card than I'd be comfortable with. Whereas something like Snapping Gnarlid or Sky Spawner, those are both solidly 1-color cards. You can put those in any decks of those colors, and they will perform. Especially Sky Spawner, it doesn't matter whether you're aggressive, controlling, whatever. Whereas Skitterskin is the kind of card I like seeing more in late impact 2 and 3, when I kind of know the direction I'm going. Because if you want this card in your deck, it's going to be one of the better 4-drops in your deck. It's a 4/3 that's really hard to kill when it's attacking.
Yeah,
but there's just some percent of decks that will just have no interest in this card, and that's not what I'm looking for in a first pick.
Yeah, exactly. Blighted Cataract is our next uncommon. It's a land, taps for colorless. You can pay 5 and a blue, tap, sack it to draw 2 cards. So I do love this card. It's super cool.
These cards have, I think they're going to continue to be a little underdrafted. Not because people don't think they're good, but because people don't realize exactly how good they are. The key being, it doesn't take up a spell slot. It's your 18th land.
How important is that?
It's really important, because we keep talking about how these are 2-for-1s, or in the case of Cataract, almost a 3-for-1, just because when you tap this for mana 3 times before using it, it's like you already got a card's worth of value out of it, and then you get to draw 2 cards off it. Granted, it's expensive, and that's what I think tricks people, is that, the Blighted Gorge, the red one, costs 4 in a red to deal 2 damage. That just doesn't look good. But Cataract and Gorge in particular, those 2 are so good just because they're just free spells that are really good even later.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how these ones creep up the ranks as we go through the set.
That being said, I don't think you can take it over the Sky Spawner.
Yeah, see, and that's the hard part, right? Is that even though it gets a bump in utility because it doesn't take up a slot, the good slots are still going to be taken over it for the most part. I'm really curious to see where cards like Blighted Cataract end up falling. Ulamog's Despoiler is our next uncommon. It's 6 colorless for a processor. It's a 5/5. And when it enters the battlefield, you can process 2 cards. And if you do, it gets 4 +1/+1 counter. So you can get a 9/9 for 6 mana. No evasion, nothing like that. And you do have to process 2 cards, which is a lot. But otherwise, your fallback plan is a 6 colorless mana for a 5/5, which is, okay.
Yeah, I like Ulamog's Despoiler a reasonable amount. It's one of the cards that's kind of evened out the variance on both sides, where when you get there, it's good, certainly. Like a 9/9 is great, but it's not as good as some of the ingest cards. But when you miss, it's also still pretty good. It's a 6-mana 5/5, so it kind of does a good thing on both ends, and it's a little better if you have the ingest cards to support it. Granted, the fact that it takes 2 cards means it's a lot. Like 2 is a lot more than a 1, because I've had a lot of games where, especially when you don't have something like Benthic Infiltrator or Mist Intruder, when you have one of the like dorky ingest cards, like 2/2s with no evasion, sometimes you'll get a hit in and then not any more hits at all. And sometimes they'll just be sitting there with 1 card exiled, and that just doesn't work for the Despoilers. So this is a card which, if I was in the ingest deck, I would take it, but wouldn't really even want it all that much because it uses fuel that other cards, better cards, can use. It is a good way to utilize it, and it's a kind of safe bet, but it's worse than a lot of the cards in this pack. Yeah,
I've had a similar experience where I've either had 1 card, exiled from my opponent, and that was from complete disregard or, some removal spell or something along those lines, or 0, or a lot, right? Or I've had, a Benthic Infiltrator get in there for 3 or 4 times, and, and it's not a problem at all. But that first card that you get exiled is pretty valuable, and using it up, you got to be careful about how you want to use it up. And Ulamog's Spoiler doesn't even let you do it for the first.
Yeah, I've definitely seen games where players do not process when they can. Like I remember seeing Josh or Leighton play a Mindraker, the 3 and a black 3/3 that process 1 to make them discard a card, and just choose not to process his opponent's only card. Because he just had better cards to process with later and had 5 or 6 cards in hand.
Oh, gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, and that makes sense, especially if there's not, if you look and you're like, well, I'm not getting anything else exiled here for a while. We've actually got a foil here. It's Oracle of Dust. It's 4 and a blue for a common 3/5 devoid Eldrazi processor, and you can pay 2 colorless and process 1 card to loot.
I like Oracle of Dust.
I like it.
It's a card I've found you can pick up pretty late because there aren't very many decks at the table that want it. And basically, if you have no hope of using the ability, it's not really playable or it's very bad. But in a deck that can reasonably expect to get a loot or 2 over the course of the game, the card's fairly solid. So,
yeah, I found it that way too, though I will say that, the decks that was good in that I really felt happy about it were the decks where I was actively trying to get ingest going, where I was running as many Benthic Infiltrators as I could get. I even ran a Mist Intruder or something, a card that's a little bit subpar, because it was supposed to be like I was, doing what I said. I went for a hardcore ingest processor type deck, and Oracle of Dust held its own for sure in that type of deck because I was able to loot multiple times. But just in the scenario that we described previous, where it was like, oh, I've got like 1 Benthic Infiltrator, but I've got a complete disregard and I got the counter spell or whatever. And so I'll probably have something occasionally get, exiled. Oracle of Dust loses a lot of its luster. Even the spoil one.
It's just not a high priority for me. It's the kind of card that it's one of the like moderate rewards for being in the ingest deck, but it's not a card I'm going to take early because it doesn't really point me in that direction.
Right. So we've got Sky Spawner and Snapping Gnarlid as our 1 and 2 currently, but they're going to get blown out of the water by this one. This is a mythic rare. It's Quarantine Field.
Oh, well, this is on my short list for best cards in the set.
Oh, there you go. So I haven't actually played with or against it yet, so I'm curious. I mean, we gave it a very high grade, and I think it's plainly quite awesome. But you never quite know until you get it in gameplay where you're like, oh my god, right? Like that's ridiculous.
Well,
so
sometimes because
we both gave it an A. We both gave it an A, but I still
So this is a white XX enchantment, and then when you play it, you can exile X non-land permanents, and then they come back. If the Quarantine Field goes away, but basically what this does is, if you need to, and this is kind of not your first choice, if you need to, you can pay 4 mana and exile any non-land permanent. And that's already good. I would always play a card in my deck that was 2 white, exile a non-land permanent.
Mm-hmm.
But if you pay 6 mana, you get 2 permanents. And at which point, you're already up on cards and mana. It's really hard to kill your opponent's 2 best permanents for 6 mana and not be up on mana. You require them to be like a 2-drop and a 3-drop, which is still going to be good, by the way. But in most cases, you're going to be up on mana. And if you can wait till 8 and exile 3, then, that's just the whole board. It's really hard for them to come back from that. So, yeah, this card is incredible, and you're just going to take it. Yeah. If it weren't there, I think you take the Sky Spawner, but given Quarantine Field's in the pack, then, well. The only card I would take over Quarantine Field in the set, I think, is Scalding Tarn. No, that's not true. Polluted Delta, Flooded Strand, Misty Rainforest.
So you have it as like the 8th best.
Yeah, I mean,
the 11th.
Look, let's be real. The vast majority of the drafts I'm going to do, I'm taking Expedition if I open it. I actually had this conversation today. What happens if draft 1 at the Pro Tour, I open like a Polluted Delta? Oh. I don't think I'm going to take it. I mean, assuming there's a good option. But it is kind of interesting to think about. I mean,
what if it's Polluted Delta or Snapping Gnarlid?
I would probably take the Snapping Gnarlid.
Okay.
I think so. I mean, yeah, I would rather do all at the Pro Tour. I would never fault anyone for taking the Delta, though. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. It's hard to turn down. Like, realistically, if you say, like, I don't know what the prices are going to be by the time of the Pro Tour. I have no clue about any of this stuff. But let's say Polluted Delta is still like $300 or something. Uh-huh. If it's $300, like, bear in mind it's a playable card too. Polluted Delta is not a 0. I mean, this is a card that fixes your mana and is good with landfall. It's going to get you less wins than Snapping Gnarlid, but it's probably worth more money to your deck. Like the extra wins you get from having a Snapping Gnarlid in your deck probably don't get you $300 if you look at the overall records. The reason that I would take Snapping Gnarlid is that I value making top 8 or potentially winning the Pro Tour at a lot more than what the actual like tangible prizes are.
Right. Totally. And you only get so many, right? That's the thing. I think that, people.
Yeah. You get 4 if you're lucky, a year, like myself, like I'm not going to lie. I'm very, very lucky. I presumably get to play as many Pro Tours as I want, until I decide to stop, but that's still just 4 a year. Like you said, that's maximum, right? Is 4 a year. I mean, until a 5th gets added, cross our fingers. So given that, I mean, I don't want to, dredge up this whole debate again, but, what I do want to see is a feature draft where like someone opens a Scalding Tarn or whatever. That would make me very happy.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind commentating that again.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's do another Crack a Pack. These are fun, and going back to our Patreon question, I think these are a good thing. All right, we have got. Remind me not to get rid of the lands either. I'll include those with the Patreon winners, which I think I already put somewhere. Anyway, I'll find it. So first up is Reclaiming Vines, which is a reasonable sideboard card.
Yeah, an enchantment, artifact, or land. I mean, if your opponent is like multiple colors and has a bunch of awakened spells, land destruction is okay. I still don't have the instant speed one, and you're not really on the lookout for these. In general, I think you're not going to side these in. I would, however, side it in against the person playing against our last Crack a Pack where they have Quarantine Field. So.
Oh yeah, that reverses that quite nicely.
One thing I do like about this card, by the way, just real quick, is that you side it in against their particular enchantment in general, or like maybe even an artifact, but probably an enchantment. And if they don't draw it, you can just pop off one of their lands, and that's not terrible.
Oh, that's true. And especially if they happen to be playing multiple colors, or, if you see them miss a land drop and you're not,
right.
You can certainly capitalize.
It's not a dead card like, say, if it was just 1 green destroy target enchantment, that would be dead if they didn't draw their enchantment. This at least does something.
Mm-hmm. All right, next is Mist Intruder.
So we're going to talk about this card later, I think, but suffice to say that I don't think I hate Mist Intruder. I like it more than I initially thought I would. Okay. But I will be unhappy if I first pick it.
I'm a little... Yeah, I'm not super high on the old Misty. Shatterskull Recruit is next. It's the 3 red 4/4 giant warrior ally with menace.
So
Shrug?
Yeah, I mean that's basically it. Like, I think you're actually happy about this card. It's slightly better than the average 5-drop, but it's not anything special. It's not something you should take early. It's a 5-mana card. It's not the most impressive one. It should make your deck most of the time though.
Yeah, I agree. This keeps popping up. We've had multiple sets in a row where the red 5-drop slot gets a little bit clogged, and there's nothing that stands out as this like ridiculous one. And Shatterskull Recruit kind of fills the role that we see pretty often, which is, this is good. It's a fine card. You mentioned Pricklebora in the set review, and it's like, yeah, that was a good card too, right? But none of these are like, oh, I got a Shatterskull Recruit, windmill it, right? It's these common 5-drops are usually kind of in the middle, which is probably where they should be. Felidar Cub. 1 and a white for a 2/2 cat beast. You can sack it to destroy an enchantment.
Yeah, Felidar Cub is fine. It's a 2-drop that has a slight upside, which is really all you can ask for. But this isn't a world that you want necessarily 2-drops with slight upsides. I'm looking for a little more than that. So I'm not taking Felidar Cub early, and I'm not always playing it.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part about sets like Battle for Zendikar, which is really shaping up to be a pretty synergistic format from what I can see. The decks that I've seen do well, seem to be more streamlined and have a lot more going on than just good cards. And while Felidar Cub does stand on its own as a pretty solid little card, it's not a Cat Beast ally, right? It's not Devoid. It doesn't have Ingest. It doesn't make Eldrazi spawn. It doesn't ramp you. It just is kind of okay on its own. And I think we're going to see the more we play that cards like this kind of end up being more like sideboard style cards, because you're like, well, I don't want this card in my deck on its own, even though, on its surface it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's a very big departure from Origins, and I think that's cool. I think it's good to mix things up. I also tend to like formats like this more anyway, but you would never cut Felidar Cub from your deck in Origins, so
no.
The fact that we're talking about it here is I think, pretty cool.
Totally. Wavewing Elemental is next. It's the 5 and a blue for a 3/4 flyer. It's an elemental, and it's got landfall. It gets +2/+2.
This is kind of like the Shatter Skull, but a little bit worse, because it's a 6-drop instead of a 5, and blue is just, I think, a little less likely to need this kind of top end, because this is a kind of, neutral top end. It's like Felidar Cub. It doesn't play well with a lot of the themes. It doesn't play well in the ally theme or in the like Eldrazi theme or in the Ingest theme. So in general, I think the card is fine. It's a 5-power flyer at common, but it's not a card I'm going to take early.
Yeah, we mentioned this in the set review as well, but I actually did have a chance to play this. I boarded it in, and it kind of lived up to what we predicted for it, which was that, your landfall creatures are really, like, this is why we like Snapping Gnarlid, because it's not uncommon to play a Snapping Gnarlid and then have it be a 3/3 for 3 or 4 turns in a row, ready to attack. And that's really strong. That a 2-mana 3/3 that can attack for 3 or 4 turns consecutively as a 3/3, and maybe even a 4/4 on one of them or something, is very good. And a Wavewing Elemental comes down as a 3/4, which is a reasonable blocker in the air, but it's not great. And then oftentimes you don't immediately hit your next land drop, or if you do, it's going to be another couple of turns before you hit again. And so even though this card looks like a 5/6 flyer, it does play a little bit more towards the 3/4 end of things in my experience with it, and it'll occasionally pop up to 5/6 as well. And it's close enough to be playable, I think, but it's just not, like you said, it doesn't fit in any of the other themes. And if you want to put it in your landfall deck, it's coming down a little too late to expect to consistently just hit land, and, turn this thing into a dragon.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't read this as a landfall card, as in, like, it's in a landfall deck.
Right.
Especially since and again, as we talk, get a surface level talk about archetypes later, I don't think the landfall deck is even that strongly themed of a deck. It's just a bunch of cards that tend to work, okay together. So
sure.
In general, yes, this is not really a landfall card. It's just a kind of like a medium finisher, which is not something I'm really looking for to begin a draft.
Yeah, I brought it in because my opponent had flyers and I had other medium finishers in the starting slot, and I was like, well, these ones block better than my others,
that's
so
very
sure.
reasonable.
But that's just not exciting, right?
Yeah, of course. There's some limited formats, maybe the little slightly older ones, where this card would be amazing, by the way, where it's better than a lot of the rares, but just that's not the world we live in right now.
No, not at all. Evolving Wilds, we talked about that. Here's one that's I haven't played in my deck, but I've played against it, and it was kind of scary, to be honest. It's Silent Skimmer.
I like this card a lot.
Yeah, I kind of like it too.
3 and a black for a 0/4 flying, so it passes the vanilla test, and, I assume. And when it attacks, your opponent loses 2 life. So what I like about this card is you play this, it can almost always block something good immediately. Like, you play this, it's just going to block something, and then it gets in for 2, pretty much unstoppable. There's not very many cards that can kill it, and they can't block it. So I think it just does both those. It does offense and defense well enough that I think it's a good card. Yeah,
I've faced this thing down and just looked at my hand and looked at the board and been like, well, I'm taking 2 a turn from that forever. It's just hard to come up with enough flyers to block it. You don't need many, but it's not like they're everywhere in the set. So yeah, Silent Skimmers impressed me. Rush of Ice is the blue sorcery, tap target creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, and it's got Awaken 3 for 4 and a blue. This one has not blown me away. It's so similar to Clutch of Currents, but Clutch of Currents just tends to play a lot better than it does. They're both common. That I think I had 1 Rush of Ice in one deck, and I don't think I ever drew it. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like a card that's going to have like a big impact on the format.
Yeah, and even, Awaken cards, I think, don't really stack all that well. I mean, I know you can put, and this is one of the tips, is to put all the counters on the same land, so you get a bigger and bigger creature instead of spreading it over. But in general, because the Awaken cards, most of them tend to be cards you don't really want to cast. You only want to use the Awaken. It's just you end up with a kind of expensive deck if you put too many Awaken cards in the same deck. So this is one of the ones that I think are lower priority.
By the way, you said one of your tips. You did write a nice little column.
I did on Channel Fireball. I wrote a kind of just a pretty quick hit tips and tricks column after my experience at the pre-release, just because there's a lot of like kind of interesting things going on, and it was kind of my 15-minute view of the format. But there's a lot of kind of subtle things happening in the format. We're going to get to them, I'm sure, every week as we pick up more of them. But it's a good place to start looking at that sort of thing.
Yeah, and interestingly, I also wrote about that in the column that came out that same week. It was a little earlier, but it was the same time frame, and I had a similar thing where I just wrote down a bunch of things that I noticed at the pre-release. Some of them were just little things, reminding people which card's a sorcery and which one's not, that kind of stuff, and all the way up to some bigger observations as well. I did that for the limited information column, so you guys can check that out if you're just yearning for more Marshall and Luis. Natural Connection, 2 and a green, instant, rampant growth.
I still am not in love with this card.
I come around on it. It's going to wear you down.
Am I? I don't think so. I mean, I'm not saying the card's unplayable. I've never said that. I just don't think it does the things it does very efficiently, which is it doesn't ramp your mana all that efficiently, and it's like a kind of medium combat trick if you have some landfall creatures. So I'm still not.
But you get both.
Yes, I understand that.
Fixing, ramping, and a medium combat trick all in one easy to cast shell.
Well, that is true.
What's not to love? Although the problem is that it's rarely all of those things at the same time. It's usually more like one or sometimes two of those roles filled. Yeah, I don't love Natural Connection, but I do think it's playable still, and I've seen people do some pretty good stuff with it as far as landfall triggers go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a card that you could play, but certainly not one I'm taking early or ever.
Early or ever? How about Drawn as Emissary? Is that one that you're going to take early or ever? That's the 2/2 flyer for 1 white black, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you drain your opponent for 1.
Well, it's certainly the most powerful card we've seen so far. It is the front runner or front flyer, I guess. It is a 2-color card. I don't love taking a 2-color card, but Drawn as Emissary is just so good. It's a 4-point life swing. It enables the Life Gain Matters deck. It's kind of one of the better places to start, even though it's a gold card.
Yeah, I've played with and against, and I've been very impressed by the card. It's really, really strong.
Yeah, I mean, even
gold
if
cards
you end
are
up,
tough, though.
Yeah, even if you end up abandoning it a decent percentage of the time, it's still, I think, worth it because it's so good if you don't.
Now, if you did, let's say that you took this pack one, pick one. Where do you see the deck going? Like, what's your ideal ending point? Because remember, she's also an ally, right? That's something to consider as well. What are the options for white-black in this format?
There's like kind of, well, I want to say 2 different decks, but they kind of merge into each other, I think, for me, mostly, which is the kind of like allies / life gain deck. It just happens that there's so much overlap that they're kind of the same ish deck, which is a not very aggressive deck that just tries to get value out of its life gain cards, and it can still definitely kill you in the air with cards like Drawn as Emissary, or on the ground with cards like the Bloodbond Vampire at 3/3 that gets ++1 counter whenever you gain life. Mm-hmm. But it's not really a super fast aggro deck, and it's not really a long game control deck. It's kind of like a mid-range deck. It's one of the more mid-rangey decks, but it's got some good synergies going on.
I've seen that too. And I have seen what you've described as well, which is where it's not just the life gain deck. I've seen that, and it actually just hasn't really impressed me that much. We'll talk about that after the Crack-a-Pack, but that is interesting to me of thinking, all right, I'm white-black with the Drawn as Emissary. Where do I want to go? Because there's some cards, some of the gold cards in the set, you first pick it and you know exactly where you want to go, and what your deck could look like at the end. And Emissary is a little bit muddled for that, at least for me right now. Jotty Offshoot.
I like this card in Constructed, or at least it's got potential, but it's 1 green for a 0/3 and then landfall gain a life.
Yeah, and it's got Defender, yeah.
It's an okay sideboard card if your opponent's really aggressive, but it doesn't even block some of the aggressive creatures. It doesn't block Snapping Gnarlid. So and it doesn't block flyers. So it's just a fun card. It's definitely a sideboard card. I want to basically never main deck this.
Right. Spawning Bed is next. I actually had a chance to play this one. It's the uncommon land tap to add colorless, or you can pay 6 mana, tap it, and sack it to get 3 Eldrazi Scions.
I like Spawning Bed a lot. This card
it
very
overperformed
powerful
for me. I will say that.
You know, I actually don't know which card's in the lead right now between Drana's Emissary and Spawning Bed.
That's interesting.
Because they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum, where Spawning Bed, you get to play this in any deck you draft. I mean, there's a chance you end up with such a low curve deck that you don't want it, but in general, you're just going to play this card. So, do you take a card, which I think is worse? I mean, if I knew I was going to be black-white, I'd for sure want the Emissary over a card that you are for sure, you might not get to play. I think I'd probably still first pick the Emissary here, but that actually might not be right. I don't know. That's very close. I'm not 100% sure. You're probably going to open a great rare, so it becomes a moot point.
All right. Well, we did not. It's a rare. It's okay. It's Aligned Hedron Network.
So the 4 colorless artifact, and then when it enters the battlefield, exile all creatures with power 5 or greater.
That's correct. Until it leaves.
Yeah, this is, I think, if I had a deck that had nothing that this hit, I'd probably main deck it, but it's more of a sideboard card.
And you're not thinking of taking it here, right?
No. For sure, I would not take it here. What would I take here?
Wait, hold on a minute. I got one more card. It's a foil swamp.
Oh, well,
beautiful.
Yeah,
So you're at F&M.
Yeah. My guess is, I might actually just take the Spawning Bed. I've come around. I would too. I think the fact that you also get to play it is just too much of a tiebreaker for me.
I wasn't quite sure how good it would be, and I main decked it, put it in my deck. My deck was mono blue splashing Barrage Tyrant, and I ran Spawning Bed, and every time I activated it was an absolute all-star. It gave me a mana bump that I needed. It provided chump blockers. It provided attackers, on my opponent's end step. It let me leave up a bunch of mana, and kind of conspicuously, and just be like, go. And, they're looking at the board and they're like, trying to figure it out. One of my opponents didn't see that I had it. I had it prominently displayed.
You hid it under your lands, okay?
I did not. I want to make that clear. And I just said, I'll activate. He's just like, attack with everything, kill you. And I'm like, before blocks, I have this thing down here, and I tried to make sure that you could see it, and here we go. And it blocked, and it just won me the game on the spot because my opponent just didn't anticipate me having 3 blockers where I had none. It's also hard to deal with for the opponent too, because you can wait until they attack, and now only instant speed things deal with the spawn, and I know that's a small point, but these little things do add up. You can do it on end step so that any type of sweeper or whatever doesn't hit your creatures, and you've all of a sudden got a board state. And goodness sakes, 3 1/1s is actually pretty good even that late in the game. It really made a difference every time I played it, and I'm quite impressed by it. I would actually take it out of this pack.
And like Marshall said, if you keep all your lands in one big stack with this at the bottom of it, it's even more effective.
I'm like Spawning Bed when I played it. I tried hard. I was like, come on, don't do it. Don't attack. And he's just like, attack with everything. I'm like, all right. Let's do one more crack a pack, Luis, and then we'll get to some of our early impressions. We've been, kind of weaving them in here, but we'll be a little more concise, and maybe some of the cards from the set review that we wanted to revisit, and then we'll be out of here. Let's see what we get out of this one. This is going to be a sweet giveaway one. Either way, just a lot of cards.
And if you open an expedition, we're splitting it, right?
No, I'm giving it away. If we open an expedition,
we're not announcing it, and then we're just splitting it.
It is absolutely getting given away on the show.
Because it's not technically part of the pack.
In limited, it absolutely is.
So it actually just is. It's technically and actually part of the pack. But other than that, it's not technically part of the pack.
Colostria Nightwatch is our first card. It's the 5 mana 4/5 in black, and it's a vampire warrior ally, and whenever you gain life, it gets flying until end of turn.
I like the card.
It's been fun.
I'll play it a decent amount of the time. It's a little better than it looks. Certainly not something I'm going to take first.
Earthen
I'll write to Earthen Arms.
Earthen Arms.
So 1 and a green, put 2++1 sorcery, put 2++1 counters on a permanent, and awaken 4/6 and a green.
That's correct.
I know it's correct. I said it.
Yeah, but I know you weren't reading that. You just remembered it.
Well, that's true. But it's still correct. And either way, this card is not one I really like very much. Like I don't like casting it for 2 mana, and I don't really love casting it for 7, even though it can play the part of a kind of mediocre finisher if you really need one. You can make your land a 6/6. You can target it with both parts.
I don't like this card at all.
No, it's not good.
No, I found it pretty bad. I've had people going all in with it against me at the pre-release and stuff, and just playing a 2-drop and then just being like, Earthen Arms, attack you for 4. I'm sure take it, and then bounce your guy, kill your guy, put up a bitter block or whatever it is, and all of a sudden they're either actual 2-for-1 or virtually 2-for-1, and it's just hard to recover from that. If the Awaken cost was a bit cheaper, 7 mana is quite a bit. Then I could see this thing being more of a player where you just kind of wait. But the fact is that the other Awaken cards tend to do a much better job of affecting the board in your favor. A lot of them kill creatures or bounce creatures or freeze creatures. And, that's a much more potent effect and a big swing rather than just giving one of your creatures +2/+2 counters, 2+1/+1 counters, I should say. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan. Here's my guy, Merc Strider. I had 3 of these, I believe, in that mono bluish deck that I mentioned. It's the mana war for the set, as we say. It's the 3 and a blue 3/2. It's an Eldrazi processor. It's got Devoid. When it enters the battlefield, you can process a card to return target creature to its owner's hand.
Yeah, this is one of the processor payoffs, but not a huge one, just because you really want this effect to be on when you want it to be on. Like you want it to be on turn 4 or 5 if you're curving out. The fact that it's just sometimes a card you're not going to be able to get to till later in the game makes the effect a lot less impressive. It's not like, say Ruin Processor to 7 mana 7/8 that you can process to gain 5 life. Like by the time you can cast that, you've got a good chance of being able to process. And anytime you can process, the card is great. Like there's no like, expired time limit on it exactly. Mm-hmm. Whereas Merc Strider's bounce ability, yes, it's going to be good at most points in the game, but if you can't do it on the critical turn you want to, the card loses a lot of value.
Yeah, totally. As much as I love cards like this, and I do think this is a perfectly fine card and it's playable and everything, it is quite demanding to have you need to process on the turn when you really want to. And you just don't always have that card ready to go. And playing this as a 4-mana 3/2 in this deck has been really underwhelming. So, I have Merc Strider somewhere in the middle. I like it a lot. I still think it's fun. But, that is a real downside needing to process. And the timing of it often doesn't work out in your favor. Sludge Crawlers next. This one's actually overperformed a little bit. It's black for a 1/1 Eldrazi Drone with Devoid and Ingest. You can pay 2 colorless to give it +1/+1 until end of turn. It's a little better than I thought it was when I first saw it.
I agree. The fact that it can pick up some ingesting, and then the fact that it's just not a dead card, when you have 6 or 7 lands out, makes the card okay.
That's what I found too. I'm not excited about it.
Want to take here.
No, not at all. Next is McKindy Patrol. It's 2 and a white for a 2/3 with Rally. It's an ally itself as well, and it gives everything Vigilance.
This is not a card I like very much.
Yeah, it's meh.
You can play it if you need another ally, but the trigger is not anything exciting, and a 3-mana 2/3 is not really what the ally decks want. So, in general, I think this card is bad.
Yeah, it's a placeholder in the ally decks from what I've seen. Lava Step Raider. Now, this one's real bad. It's red for a 1/2 Goblin Warrior, and you can pay 2 and a red to give it +2/+0 until end of turn.
Yeah, that's not the right way to go.
There's not a lot of good things to say about Lava Step Raider.
You can pay a bunch of mana to make it trade for a card that costs less than the amount you paid. So that's a good deal. But no, I mean, it's just your opponent doesn't have to block this until they want you to force to spend the mana, and it just doesn't do enough at any point in the game.
Right. Valakut Invoker is 2 and a red for a 2/3 Human Shaman. You can pay 8 colorless mana to have it deal 3 damage to a creature or player.
I actually like this card a fair bit.
I do too.
Because it basically has this like subtext of if you get to 8 mana, you win the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what that ability says. You don't just straight up win, but it gives you a lot to do once you hit 8. You're never going to be flooded if you can hit 8. So that part is very good. The fact that it's a 3-mana 2/3 is not impressive, but it does something. It does let you interact with the board. It's the kind of card I kind of want one of in most of my red decks, but I'm not going to go out of my way to take.
Yeah, I had a question about, well, when we actually get to 8, does dealing 3 damage, like how good actually is that, right? Because we know it's fine, but from my experience, it's been excellent. Like it's been relevant every time I've played against the card.
Well, is Lightning Bolt a good card?
Yeah, but it's not as good on turn 10 or 12, right? It's great because of its efficiency. And so if I had to pay 8 for a lightning bolt, even if I could do it again, I think it's a reasonable question to say, well, does this, like, in this set, am I just facing down a bunch of 5/5s and 6/6s where all of a sudden, me paying 8 mana is kind of like, well, that's fine. But as it turns out in my relative short experience here, no, it actually does affect the board in a huge way. It kills real creatures. It kills your opponent fairly quickly. And I think Valakut Invoker's quite nice. That's a good place to put 8 mana. Shadow Glider, or as it's known, Shadow Gilder, is 2 and a white for a 2/2 flying core soldier, and no, does not have ally. And did you see the comic from Cardboard Crack?
No.
he did one about that, about the, if you guys haven't seen Cardboard Crack, he does great stick figure comics. I love his stuff. And, he said he had one of his, stick figure guys like, why, I can't figure out which one of these cores is like an ally or not. And, somebody points out to him that, well, the ones with flying don't have ally. And he's like, I wonder why. And then he has a picture of like one of the cores flying above the ground, and one of the guys down below is like, come on and help us fight this war. And the guy's like, screw that. He just flies away because he doesn't have to go down on the ground and fly. And Shadow Glider, unfortunately for the ones on the ground, fits that same description.
Yeah, it can keep on flying. I'm not really super interested in snagging it just because it's just a passable card. This is one of the like unthemed cards. This is
the Felidar Cub.
Right, it's not an ally, and it doesn't really help any of the other themes. If you want to play it on turn 3, it's fine, but I'm really not looking for cards like this.
Yeah, I'm the same, and it's weird because this is the kind of card, that you mentioned it before, but you go back to Origins, and you're always playing a Shadow Glider in your deck, and this set's different. Adjustments must be made, so keep that in mind. And we've already taken 2 very rock solid type cards and kind of said, maybe they'll make the cut if we want, but that's not the kind of card we're looking for first pick. And I think that's really interesting. Dominator Drone is next. This one's impressed me. It's 2 and a black for a 3/2 Eldrazi drone with Devoid and Ingest. And when it enters the battlefield, if you control another colorless creature, each opponent loses 2 life.
I'm not a big fan of Dominator Drone.
I like him.
I don't think it really does the thing you want.
I mean, have you played this like red-black?
Yeah, the red-black aggro deck is the one that actually this goes in. It's not good in the like blue-black ingest deck, I don't think.
Exactly. It's very mediocre. But in the red-black one, I've been really impressed by it because like it's 3 power for 3 mana, which is reasonable. The ingest doesn't seem to come up that often, but the 2 damage does, and you can usually trigger it quite easily. And then also there's just tends to be enough cards around that care about you having either creatures or colorless creatures that I find that this guy really holds his own pretty well.
Yeah, I think you will play it in the red-black deck, but I'm not going to be super happy about it anywhere else.
All right. Blood Bond Vampire. This is our first uncommon, and this is the one you mentioned earlier with the life gain, right?
Yes, it's 2 black for a 3/3, and it is an ally, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And when you gain life, put a ++1 counter on it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played with her against, but this card feels like it could just get out of control.
Yeah, it's not even as much getting out of control as the fact that you play this and then gain 1 life, and it's a 4/4, and that's pretty good. And it threatens to get a lot bigger with a lot of the cards in the set. So again, this is not where I want to start my draft exactly, but it is a good playable card in one of the archetypes.
All right, well, in that same exact archetype, we have Serene Stewart. These are right next to each other. This would be a good card for Sealed. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 human cleric ally at uncommon, and it says whenever you gain life, you can pay white. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature.
This is a much higher payoff than the Bloodbound Vampire, just because it lets you spread their counters around wherever you want. You do have to pay mana for them, which is a drawback, but Serene Stewart is, again, another good card in this life gain deck.
Yeah, I found this card good, and I think both of these really do illustrate what you were talking about before, Luis, about how there's a big crossover between the ally deck and this sort of life gain matters theme deck. Both of these creatures that we just mentioned are both allies. And so if you can weave in either these into an ally deck where you're just sort of randomly getting extra value, or more allies into this type of deck to give you that late game punch or just some more mid-range power, then I think that's where you want to be with this. Because I've seen people try to draft just the white-black life gain deck. My friend Lee, he was on my right in one of the drafts I did, and he did. And, he had most of the pieces in the deck. He had the Drawn as Emissary, he had the Serene Stewart, he had the Blood Bond Vampire, and he had a couple of the repetitive life gain effects. And, he just wasn't impressed with the deck, and watching him play it out, it just didn't have that big punch. I mean, he did have one game where he was able to go long, but it did kind of take over the Serene Stewart and kind of went nuts. But all the other times he was under a lot more pressure, and the deck felt a little clunky and a little slow with not a huge payoff. You get a good ally deck and the payoff is ridiculous. You get a deck that's good along these lines, and you paid a white mana and got a +1/+1 counter, and you could probably repeat that a few times, which is powerful, but it's not the same immediate punch that you get out of some of the other decks in the format. So something to keep in mind as we move forward. Tide Drifter's next, one in a blue 05 Devoid Eldrazi drone, and it says other colorless creatures you control get +0/+1.
I really like Tide Drifter. This is this is my front runner right now.
Oh wow, really?
I think the card is just really good. I think it's great in like the blue-green or the blue-black Eldrazi / Devoid decks. And in general, it's a 2-drop that just blocks every other 2-drop in the format that doesn't fly.
Yeah, I have seen this thing brick wall. I played against it and had myself in a situation where I should have just killed it. And I waited and I waited, and I had removal. I had like a 5-mana removal spell for it. And I waited and waited and waited and waited, and it just soaked up a whole bunch of damage. And I was thinking, well, I'm going to use my removal spell on some bomb because this was sealed. And that stupid Tide Drifter just was responsible for soaking up so much damage over the course of the game that I looked back and just thought I should have just killed it. And in game 2, I did. I just snapped the thing off the first time I could, and I felt an immediate sigh of relief as my opponent was playing basically all colorless, and the Tide Drifter was doing good work. I was impressed by it. I was thinking that's something I have to keep my eye on.
Well, I think one big part of it is like you mentioned, you had a 5-mana removal spell that can kill it. It's just hard to kill it with any card that costs any amount of mana close to it. The 3-mana removal spells, complete disregard hits it, but Touch of the Void it misses. Unnatural Aggression, the fight card, probably misses most of the time.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty resilient card.
Yeah, I've been impressed by it too. All right, well, we've got 2 rares left. One of them's foil, and the other one is not. Which one you want first, Luis?
Foil.
Foil rare is Duststalker.
2 red-black, 5/3 Devoid, haste, and then at the end of each turn, return it to your hand if you don't have any other colorless creatures.
That's right.
Yeah, I like Duststalker. It's really good in the black-red deck, which conveniently enough has a lot of colorless creatures in it. And it's fairly powerful. It does open you up to a lot of sequences like bounce your creature, kill your creature, and return Duststalker. I actually think I might take the Tide Drifter first. But we'll see what the other.
Yeah, the Duststalker hits really, really hard, but it is gold card, and it doesn't really only go in one deck, like you said.
It's kind of a double gold card. It's a gold card and a Devoid card that needs other Devoid creatures.
Yeah, and that is very restrictive. And it must be said that it's not an amazing payoff, right? It's not like, but if you're in that deck, it's kind of like, yeah, it's really good. Like that's a card I would play every time and I want in the deck, but still, it's a creature on the ground with 3 toughness, right? And it has a drawback. So it still isn't that massive payoff that you hope, when you commit that hard early. Our last card is also a rare. It's Emeria Shepherd.
All right. Well, Emeria Shepherd is a pretty big game.
Is that business for you or what?
It is. It's. Do
you remember what it does?
Yes. It's 4 white for a 4/4 flying, and it has landfall, return a non-land permanent to your hand, and if it's the land you played as a plane, just put it into play instead.
Yeah, and those are coming from your graveyard. And quick correction, it's 5 white.
Oh, it's 5 white. It's not 4 white. All right. Even better, see?
Yeah, it is. We just got to slide.
I think this is one of the better finishers in the set. I think that there's a lot of good finishers, so maybe it doesn't make like the top 10 exactly, but there's a lot of good expensive cards, and this is one of them. Just because if you play this, then play a plains, you just got 2 pretty big threats into play, and then you ended up, having a card your opponent has to deal with. If they don't kill Emeria Shepherd, you're just going to win the game. So I think that I wouldn't mind starting on Emeria Shepherd here.
Yeah, that's what I would take too. I had the extreme misfortune of playing against this with my basically mono blue bouncier creature deck. That did not work out well for me. Having no real way to get Emeria Shepherd off the battlefield permanently means that if you can't just kill your opponent in a very short time span, that card completely takes over because yeah, they're just going to replay it. And this time they brought a land along for the ride as well, and you just fall further and further behind. All right, so that's going to do it for Cracker Packs. I'm taking the Amiri Shepherd as well. I think that card's great and a worthy ramp target indeed. All right, so let's get to the main body of the show. This will go a little quicker, I think, than normal, as we like to spend a little more time on the Cracker Packs for these initial ones, because, again, like our question of the week, we like to put ourselves in the same shoes that you're in when you sit down for that draft at your local shop or when it comes out on Magic Online and you're just staring at a whole pack of cards going, what the hell am I supposed to do? It gives you an idea of how Luis and I will break down the pack and what we're thinking about, at least in the early parts. But let's get into some of the things that we've noticed and some of the things that maybe we've underrated or overrated or whatever. One of them that I wrote about in the column and wanted to bring up here as well was just how many colorless cards there actually are available in the set. When we went over the set review, it wasn't immediately clear to me how many I could actually fit into an average deck. I would have figured that, thanks to Devoid, if I wasn't in a, full-on Devoid deck, that I would have, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe somewhere in that range of just, I'm going to play my Touch of the Void. It happens to be colorless. And, this creature's pretty good. It's colorless. It doesn't really matter to me, but I'm going to play it. But after having drafted a few times and looked at some of the decks that people have put together, and even in sealed, you can get a lot of colorless cards into one deck if you really want to. And it's not even that hard. Many of them are good anyway. You're not making like a huge sacrifice to put those cards in. And you can get 15, 17. I mean, you could even get to 20 if you really are dedicated to it. And I have to say that when we did the review, I just didn't think that was going to be the case. And, the card that stands out for me the most, that gained the most for me out of that was Vile Aggregate.
Yeah, Vile Aggregate is awesome. It's one of the better uncommons in the set for sure. Yeah, I think, going back to your starting point, there are more colorless creatures than maybe it looked like in terms of density, and none of them are embarrassing. Even the worst, quote unquote ones like, Sludge Crawler or the 2/2 for 2 are still fine cards. A Dominator Drone. These cards are all okay. So you're not making huge sacrifices, and there are also a lot of them are cards other decks don't want. So the more heavily themed other people are, the more colorless creatures you get if they're not in those themes. So yeah, you can get a lot of colorless cards, and Vile Aggregate is one of the big winners of that. Metal Drone is another one. We were pretty high on it, but it turns out the card's just awesome.
Yeah. And look, we nailed that one. I think we gave it a B- or something, but yeah, Metal Drone's great. And it triggers even more than we thought it would. Cause I think that, for the most part, I was thinking like, well, we'll get some incidental triggers and that'll be nice. But as it turns out, in these dedicated Devoid or colorless decks, you can just trigger that thing like most turns, and and you're still just playing the cards that you would have wanted to play anyway.
Yeah, and I think another big one is Swarm Surge, and this one I think we did miss on. We bagged on it pretty hard. This gives 2 and a black. All your creatures get +2/+0, and then if they're colorless, they get first strike. Mm-hmm. I think this is just a good finisher. It's
a sorcery, right?
It is a sorcery. It's a specific card. You do want it in this deck only. Pretty much like playing this in like a black-white ally deck sounds horrendous, but it is just a really good finisher for the Devoid deck. So, and you'll want 1 or 2 in your deck. So
yeah,
that card is much, much better than it looked on first read.
And the thing that we also have to take into account here is that Eldrazi Scions, we were wondering during the set review, well, how many are there going to actually be around? Like we just had a rough feel for there will be some on the battlefield at some time. But, I was kind of thinking back to old Eldrazi, Rise of the Eldrazi days, and the old Eldrazi tokens, the spawns, and thinking about how many we had on the battlefield there. And then in my mind, I was thinking, well, we'll probably have fewer Scions just because they're better. They probably just didn't want to tack them onto quite as many creatures. But as it turns out, it's pretty close. Like you see in the decks that make them, you will see them every game. There will be, 1 to 5 of them, depending on what your deck's playing or what your opponent's deck's playing, and they'll be floating around, and those add up in a big way. I mean, what was the overrunning card called again?
Swarm Surge.
Yeah, Swarm Surge. When you spewed out 3 or 4 extra creatures off of Eldrazi Scions, or in the form of Eldrazi Scions from creatures you were playing anyway, all of a sudden Swarm Surge looks so much stronger, where you're just punching through way more damage and on relatively expendable bodies as well. Because you figure your your normal creatures are going to have 2 or 3 power for the most part anyway, at least. And those ones are going to be very difficult to block once they have first strike. And then that leaves a bunch of, 3/1 scions that are crashing in, and they have first strike as well. But even if your opponent has a few big creatures, you're willing to get rid of those. That's just not that bad to punch in an extra 8 or 12 damage or whatever. So I definitely seen that. Luis, the big question I have is, how deep can we go? Can we Molten Nursery or not?
I think that you can, but that one is, I think, a little less, can happen a lot less often than some of these other cards. This is the card that you really can't afford to have misses in. Whereas like Nettle Drone, you can play Nettle Drone in like a red-green landfall deck. Nettle Drone's still going to be pretty good. Molten Nursery, you really have to have basically 1 to 2 misses at most. Okay,
and then let's say you play 2 Molten Nurseries, or maybe even 3. Is that something that you're looking to do here? Because like I thought about it, and like they trigger each other, which is kind of interesting, maybe. And then once you get 2 Molten Nurseries down, every time you play a colorless card, you get to shock something, right? A creature or player. And by the third one, you're tossing around lightning bolts. But the turns that you take to actually play them, they're not doing as much. Now, again, they do trigger each other, which is, I mean, that might be the difference between it being okay and it being bad. I don't actually know. But, if I can have a deck that has 18, 19 plus colorless cards in it, it does feel like Molten Nursery might actually have a home.
Yeah, I think it does. It's also the kind of card you might either sideboard out against a deck with bigger creatures or sideboard in against a deck with smaller ones, because there's some decks that are much more vulnerable to it than others.
Yeah, that's my usual approach, is to bring it in when I know it's going to be good, or at least going to get value. All right, I got to bring this one up with you, Luis. Turn against. So this is the 4 and a red, and you get to steal your opponent's creature at instant speed until the end of the turn, untap it, it gains haste, etc. Now, I want to lead off by saying this card's a beating, right? There's no doubt about it. I gave it a high grade. You gave it a lower grade than I did in the review. But one thing that we both talked about, and that I've been talking to various people about as well, is how much lower does this card go when people start playing around it? Because I'll tell you what, they've already started. I played around it right away because I know how powerful this type of card is, so I respect it. I had opponents play around it, even at the first draft I did, and these weren't, high level opponents or whatever, and even they were thinking like, oh, well, what if he has that one thing? And it was really interesting because to me, the card it's telegraphed whenever you can. Like, I've never seen somebody cast it and not just been like, and been blindsided by it. I'm always like, well, it's a very real possibility that somebody has a turn against here. And then when it comes off, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that was kind of the obvious thing, or that was the thing that you should have been thinking about the most. And if that's the case, as we move through the format and people get used to it and people get blown out, and man, it hurts when you get wrecked by a turn against you. It sticks out in your head. You don't forget the first time somebody casts that and steals your creature and blocks your other creature, and you just watch your whole board state fall apart to this card. It sticks in your head. How low can we actually go with this? Because ultimately it's still very powerful, right? It's not that it's not, it's just, if people know about it, it does lose some of its luster.
Yeah, it's tricky where the card clearly, again, is powerful, has a powerful effect, is the kind of card that can win you games no other card can. But yeah, if people are aware of it, it does get worse. I mean, it certainly doesn't get better. The more people play around it, the less times you're going to get the 2-for-1 on turn 5. Fact of the matter is, though, the situation where you leave 5 mana up on turn 5 and your opponent plays around it is not like the only one. Sometimes you can't play around this card. Sometimes you just play a game and it goes to turn 9 and your opponent just doesn't have something to play on turn 9. What are you going to not attack because they might have turn against? That's not sending up red flags to begin with. And even if they have turn against in your deck, it's really hard to never attack with any of your creatures. So yeah. I think that the floor on this is still reasonable. It's not one of the best cards in the set, mainly because people are a lot wiser now than they may have been, 15 years ago when Ray of Command was a thing. I guess that was even longer than that. And, but at the end of the day, it's still a very powerful effect that it's hard to completely get around. And sometimes it's going to be used kind of like Active Treason. You're an aggressive black-red Devoid deck. You take their 7-8 and attack them with your 4 creatures. and then they're dead. So the card is good. We're gonna see, people learn to play around it better. It's gonna get a little worse. It's not gonna get too much worse, but don't go nuts over this card. Don't, like, comparing this to Rolling Thunder is kind of a joke, right? I think that Rolling Thunder is just a much better card. Yeah. Not that people are doing that, but I'm just saying, like, Rolling Thunder, nothing your opponent does can make that card anything less than excellent, pretty much. Whereas Turn Against is a card your opponent has some more control over.
By the way, Rolling Thunder, ugh.
Yeah, people are like, oh, well, in this format, maybe it's not going to be as bad. There's these giant Eldrazi. No, the card is still just completely absurd.
It's just stupid. Yeah, I live in fear of it. I know in the draft I did last week, one of the guys at the table ended up with 2 of them because I saw him double Rolling Thunder his opponent on back-to-back turns for 7 and then 8 or whatever. And so when I played against him, I just lived in constant fear of getting Rolling Thundered. And I'm just looking at every board state I'm in, and I'm just like, well, if he has Rolling Thunder, I'm dead. Like, he either just kills 3 of my creatures or just aims it at my head. And he was playing the red-black Devoid deck that we had mentioned a few times. It's very aggressive. It has a lot of incidental ways to get damage in, like the Nettle Drones and such. And it's just like the scariest card. And I mean, I can't lie. I just kind of wish it wasn't there. Like, it just feels so ridiculous that, everything can be fine until it occurs to you that your opponent could have Rolling Thunder. And you're just like, never mind. And,
how are you going to play around it?
And you just don't. I'm just sitting there like, yeah, I mean, do your worst, because, that's just not a very fun feeling. Most of the cards in the set, even some of the big Eldrazi and stuff, I can always think of, like, if I knew my opponent had that, how would I play? And it's probably differently than, like, your standard baseline type play. But if it's Rolling Thunder, it's like, well, let's just hope they don't have it. You cross your fingers and then, boom, she fires it off and you're dead. Allies. The green ones, specifically Tajuru Warcaller. That's the 3GG 2/1 that gives all your creatures +2/+2 when it or another ally enters the battlefield. Damn. Man, that card's been good. I have been curved into with capping off with a Tajuru Warcaller a couple of times already, and I have not won one of those games yet. And those were on draws where I felt like I was, being productive, curving, doing good things with my mana, and I was like, oh. And it feels kind of like a mini overrun, which it resembles in a lot of ways. And what I'll say is that usually when they play the Tajuru Warcaller, they attack with a bunch of things. You line up a few blocks. Maybe you trade off 2 of your creatures for 1, chump block another thing and survive. And then you just look at them and just pray that they don't have another ally. Because if they do, you're just dead. And I feel like that card is one of the big payoffs. And I'm assuming that Tajuru Beastmaster, that's the 6 mana one that gives all your team +1/+1, is similar enough that, it is also a big payoff. But I got to say that Warcaller has just been nuts every time I've seen it.
Yeah. So the allies are in a kind of interesting spot here. I think that there's certainly an ally deck. There's a couple. I think the one that you're going to see be maybe the best, or at least the one that's most consistently looks the same, is like the red-white aggressive ally deck. Okay. And that's, it uses like Fire Mantle Mage and Chasm Fiend and Core Blade Master, and then just a lot of Resolute Blade Master, especially the double striking allies, it's Tajuru Warcaller.
Yep.
And it just uses aggressive red and white creatures that a lot of which happen just to be allies. And that deck's game plan is pretty simple. It just plays a bunch of creatures and beats you down. And it cares about allies a fair amount. The other thing you're going to see is these like more multicolor ally decks, but I don't think that this is like, oh, I don't need non-allies in this deck. I'm only looking for allies. It's not like the Devoid deck. Like the red-black Devoid deck might literally just not play non-Devoid creatures because they don't fit the deck's theme and all their cards are based on that. Yeah. The ally deck is not really like that. Tajuru Warcaller, yeah, it's an amazing card. It's one of the better uncommons for sure, but it works just fine with a bunch of non-allies. You don't need a bunch of allies. In fact, often you're going to cast and win the game that turn, so who cares if you have another follow-up ally? Yeah,
your Gnarlids will take that +2/+2 just fine, thank you very much.
Yeah, and clearly it is better to have a follow-up ally, but it's not necessary, and like there's just like a lot of allies that are decent, like even the Tajuru Blademaster, the 5/5, still, I mean, it's a fine card even if you don't have a ton of other allies.
Yeah, Beastmaster.
Or Beastmaster, rather. So there's not... The multicolor ally deck I don't think is as focused, which is why I say it's going to look a little different. It's going to bleed into the ramp deck a lot of the time, especially since you have cards like the 2 and a green Converge Scout here that make it a lot better to just be playing 3 colors. The fact that, the Tajuru Stalwart, the fact that it's an ally is kind of secondary.
Yeah.
So,
and are you seeing this deck as a go wide type scenario too? Like one play that my opponent made was, I think it's called Eyeless Watcher, the 1/1 that gets
the 3 and a green for a 1/1 that makes 2 Eldrazi Scions.
Yeah, just made 3 bodies and then had a couple of other, snappy gnarlid type cards and was like Tajuru Warcaller. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm taking so much damage.
Yeah.
Even though there wasn't an ally thing,
And that makes sense. Like, part of the reason that card specifically is good is because it accomplishes 2 things at once. It's a ramp card because it gets you up to 6-7 mana, and it's an ally or enabler because there's 2 of the allies, the Warcaller and the Beastmaster that pump your whole team.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's a kind of like a deck that it's just kind of convenient how these pieces fit together. Scions ramp you and provide extra bodies. The allies take advantage of being 3+ colors. But also help just add to your creature count to win the game. It's not heavily themed. I wouldn't expect this deck to have 10 or 12 allies at all. It's more like it has like 4 or 5 allies, that sort of thing.
Okay, but it has the right allies.
It has the right ones, right? This is very much a deck built on having these specific allies, and a lot of them don't necessarily have to have triggers. Like, if you have, the like a lantern guide that gives your whole team lifelink, that's great. This works very well with your plated crushers, but in general, this isn't like the red-white deck. The red-white deck really does want 10+ allies in it, so it can just keep hitting that note. This deck's not as much like that.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff, especially because it means that if you do first pick a Tajuru Warcaller, it means you don't have to prioritize just allies after that. And also, we'll note here that Tajuru Warcaller costs 3 green, which means it's not splashable, which means you probably won't see it in that red-white deck unless they're willing to go, full-on Naya colors. So really interesting stuff. The lines are sort of starting to form as far as, who goes where and, which deck wants which cards and that kind of stuff. And this is one of the neat little intersections. Converge. You've done more drafts than I have. I have not drafted a deck that tried to leverage Converge in any meaningful way. I've played a few Converge cards that just fit into a deck that, had the ability to make a 3rd color of mana or whatever, and they were fine at, kind of shrug or whatever. Felt maybe a little bit clunky, but I have seen a couple of decks floating around the draft tables where they were clearly going for 4 to 5 colors and, trying to take advantage of some of these Converge cards. You got any feel for if that's a thing?
I so far don't think Converge is one of the more reliable themes. There are cards that pay you for converging, and those cards are good. But in general, like Tajuru Stalwart's one of them. Again, a 3-mana 3/4 is great. Woodland Wanderer is a card I played with, and I liked the 3 and a green 2/2 with Vigilance, Trample, and Converge. So it's frequently a 5/5 or, if you're lucky, a 6/6. But in general, it's not one of the I would not list it as one of the staple archetypes. I just don't think the mana fixing is there. There's Natural Connection, which I still don't love because you kind of cost you a turn playing it. There's Evolving Wilds, which is good, and there's Lifespring Druid, the 2 and a green 2/1 that taps for any color. Like, those cards are good, but that's about it. There's not a whole lot past that, and that makes it a lot harder to reliably get these 4 and 5 color decks. There's rare lands that help you fix, but there's also uncommon colorless lands that you kind of want to play.
Yeah, for sure. Those are definitely at odds.
Where I've kind of ended up on Converge is if you're a green deck that has a couple sources of off-color mana, between Lifespring Druid and Natural Connection, then maybe you'll play 1 or 2 off-color basics and Evolving Wilds and a Converge card or 2. The key is that you want your Converge cards to be playable on 2 to 3 colors. And that's why I like, some of the ones like Stalwart, which is great on 3 and at least playable on 2, if not good. Mm-hmm. Whereas some of the cards like Brilliant Spectrum, 3 and a blue, draw X, where X is the number you converge, then discard 2. That card's not good on 3 and it's just playable on 4. That's a lot less appealing to me. So that's not really where I want to be. There's just not, I feel like there's not enough rewards at the common uncommon level to make me want to converge. It'll just happen some of the time when you get one of the good rares with Converge and I get a couple fixers, but it's not a deck I'm really going to look to go into.
Yeah, that's good to know because, given the advice that I gave at the beginning of the show about picking one of the headliner mechanics and pushing hard towards that direction, it looks like Converge might be one to kind of let other people suss out first. I've had that same vibe. We talked about the black-white life gain deck. I think I said what I wanted to say. when we were talking about the Goldrass, what is it called? Assassin or whatever, the vampire. And what was that card called again? No,
Bloodbond Vampire?
No, the other one. That's a good, that also fits, but the black-white one.
Oh, Drawn as Emissary.
Drawn as Emissary, thank you. That so far it does feel like, I think you were spot on, Luis, with this is more like a hybrid deck. You'll get incidental synergies from the life gain cards and the creatures and the spells that benefit from them, but that it's maybe not the thing that you want to move all in on without having a little bit of a backup plan in the form of maybe some ally synergies or something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm curious where things go, and as the show goes on the next couple of weeks, we're gonna go more in depth on these archetypes. We're gonna probably break them down, try to figure out what the key cards are and what these counts look like. This is just our first couple of drafts view of them, but yeah, I think that Black White Life Gain, I like it more than Converge. I don't love it. I think it's a fine deck though.
Okay, so we'll keep our eye on that. Another one, just keeping the, like you said, just the first few drafts in type thing is I did try to build an ingest style deck, and the gap between the ingest creatures that I thought were good, like your benthic infiltrators, versus the one that I thought were bad, like the 1/1 for 1 in blue that when you dice you loot. I did try that card out. Again, attempting to go all in on ingest and see what I could do with it. Also the Mist Intruder, I wasn't impressed by that card either. It felt like playing the bad ingesters felt really bad to me because the ingest payoffs just aren't monumental. They're good. They are good. But, I think, Merc Strider, that type of card, I think is a good representative of this type of deck, which is that it pays you for putting in the work, but I don't feel like I'm being paid back fully what I've paid in. If I play a bunch of Mist Intruders and kind of junky, the 2/2 for 2 with ingest and these cards that are fine, but just not really great. And my payoff is I get a Merc Strider active. That is often not good enough. And from what I've seen so far, I'd like to view these as a bit more of an incidental situation rather than the focal point of the deck.
Well, first of all, I think you missed a great pun last week when we were talking about Mist Intruder.
I did not miss it at all. I did. It took so much restraint to just let you just run those all day.
Second of all, I think that the blue-black deck, it feels like there's enough paying you off. Maybe it's not quite as reliable at the common level as some of these, but just having Oracle of Dust as a late game engine that kind of makes use of these, having Merc Strider, that's already a pretty good start. I think.
No, see, you're not, but I want you know what I mean? Like, I don't expect all the cards to give me this huge punch, but neither of those cards are very impressive, right?
Well, Ruin Processor is very impressive. 7 mana, 7/8 process, gain 5.
That one's good. I like that one. I found
that card to be a really big swing.
I do like that one.
And especially if you can pick up like a Ruination Guide or a Tide Drifter, the 05 and the 3/2 that give all your colorless creatures +1/+0 or +0/+1 respectively. That also kind of helps justify those cards.
See, I like those. That's what I want to do. But the actual ingest process thing, again, there's nothing that's just like, oh, but if you do that, you're just way ahead. I'm kind of like, I'm playing cards that I'd like to play. I can loot occasionally. I get to bounce a creature. I gain 5 life. Like, these are reasonable payoffs, but I don't think that they pay you back if you're going to, to go all in and pay and play, like I said, the air quotes bad, ingest creatures.
Well, first of all, I don't think you have to go all in. Benthic Infiltrator is a great card. That's one of the reasons I like this deck is that you can take early Benthic Infiltrators and not feel like you're risking much. Mist Intruder, I think, has done enough that I don't know. I think this deck is very draftable, and I think that you're going to get enough pieces often enough that I think Mist Intruder is a good enough card. Okay. I think you're going to end up playing that card a decent amount, more than it might have initially looked.
God, I kind of hope not. Just from the early stages, it is not so looking like an impressive
card. But I've had both a blue-green deck and a blue-black deck, and seen a lot of blue-black decks that really just would have taken more Mist Intruders, and that makes me think that you want to take the card a little higher.
Okay, yeah. Well, I am going to keep a very close eye on this because right now, where I want to be with this deck is on the cards that stand on their own that are good in these colors. Your Sky Spawners, that type of stuff that just does good work. I think Benthic Infiltrator counts in that camp as well. And then if I get some ingest process stuff going in addition to that, I'm quite happy to do that. I'm just thinking that maybe being all in isn't the way to go.
Well, that's the thing, is I don't think you need to be all in. I think you can just take your benthic infiltrators early, and then if you pick up a Ruin Processor and a Merc Strider in pack 1, at that point, yeah, I'd look to pick up Mist Intruders and try to pick up Oracle of Dust and try to get all these things together, as well as getting cards like Ulamog's Nullifier at Uncommon, the 2 blue-black, process 2/2/3 flying counter a spell. Like, that card is great.
Yeah, if you get that thing going, it's fantastic. All right. You've got something to say here about what you want to be doing in the format.
Right. I think one of the main takeaways, even this early on, is that you want to be doing something. And by that, I mean, there's, the Ally deck, there's the big mana Eldrazi deck, Black-White Life Gain, Ingest, Devoid. Like, these are all decks that have synergies that make your cards better than just like the sum of their parts. So I think that it's important to be in these decks. All the decks that I've seen that you can't describe as having a theme have been pretty bad. So
I agree, and we noticed that in the Cracker Packs too, right?
Yeah, it's not that these themes are all super super strong, and you notice I did leave Converge off the list. Mm-hmm. It's that you're not costing yourself much by playing the theme, first of all, because I think a lot of the cards in these decks stand on their own. And then second of all, it's because so many cards in the set, the set has so many themes. So many cards in the set are just not going to perform for you if you don't draft a deck that can make use of them. Like, you're just going to end up like looking at these Nettle Drones or looking at these Benthic Infiltrators or looking at these Bloodbond Vampires and thinking like, well, my deck doesn't really use those even though it's in those colors. And it's like, well, it's just a lot of the room in the set is taken up by these cards. So if you're not getting the extra value that these cards can bring to the table, then your cards are just going to be worse than your opponents.
And when you look at these decks, when you see a good draft deck come together, one of these sort of streamlined archetype type draft decks, you'll see it. It's like, whoa, that thing's firing on all cylinders. The synergies are there. That one card affects these other two cards once it hits the battlefield. You look at cards that have enter the battlefield requirements or requirements once they're on the battlefield to be able to do other things. And when the deck just simply doesn't have to worry. We mentioned Dominator Drone earlier, right? The 2 and a black 3/2. When it just always does 2 damage to your opponent every time you play it, it looks better, right? You're like, oh wow, that's pretty nice. If you're going to play the life gain deck and you're drawn as Emissary is always triggering something else, right? It's getting the what's it called? Blood, whatever vampire.
It's still called Bloodbond Vampire. Yeah.
Blood Bone? Is that what he said?
Blood Bond.
Blood Bond. The Blood Bond Vampire always just going up and up and up and up, right? These are the type of things that will really power these synergistic decks. And when you see them, you'll be like, oh, that's what I should be doing. Where instead of you're playing kind of, solid, good playables or whatever, you're going to be missing out on it, right? We've gone over cabs and Uber, theories as kind of tongue in cheek, but they describe real approaches to limited. And, this is very much an Uber set. I mean, this is a set where you want to go deep and you want to push hard in a direction and not one where you want to just play solid playables. I think you'll fall behind pretty far if you try that. Get out of the cab, get in an Uber.
You brought it up. I did not.
Do you have some underrated cards you wanted to mention before we get out of here?
I do. There's more underrated cards than overrated cards because there's just more of these cards that have performed above the level I thought.
Are there any properly rated cards?
Well, assume everything else is properly rated.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we had just incredible success.
I feel like this list needs to be longer somehow.
So some of the ones I noticed: Encircling Fissure, the 2 and a white, prevent all damage your opponent's creatures would deal. Awaken 2, 4 and a white instant. I mean, we said this card is good, but it's really good.
It's really good.
Yeah, it just does a lot for you. It's good on offense, good on defense. Casting it for 3 mana is not the end of the world.
Interestingly, has the same converted mana cost with its Awaken as Turn Against as well.
True, and sometimes playing around one will play around the other. Sometimes they'll play around one just to walk into the other, though.
Exactly. It's funny.
They'll play around Turn Against by attacking with a 2/2 instead of attacking with their 4/4, and then bam. Halimar Tidecaller, 2 and a blue, and it regrowths draws from your graveyard an Awaken card, and your lands have flying. This card's pretty good just because you can usually pick up some of like the Ice Rush, like the tapping blue Awaken card, as well as Clutch of Currents and Coastal Discovery being awesome. So I found that the card is pretty good. Like, it's not a bomb, but it's better than I think we said. We said it was decent. So
I think I gave it a B.
Okay, well, in that case, that's about where it is. But it's better than I expected, one way or the other. We talked about Intruder before, but I do think this card's a key piece of a deck. Another one is actually a 1/2 for 2 also, Colostria Healer, the Vampire Cleric ally that drains them for 1 whenever you play it or another ally. This just goes really well in the black-white life gain deck, and I've had decks where this is just the card I wanted more and more copies of.
So this is the intersection between the two decks that we were predicting that it kind of end up.
Yeah, this covers those bases. When you play a Bloodbond Vampire, it actually triggers the healer and immediately comes in as a 4/4.
Ooh, that's nice.
Is relevant, and you if you stack these up, it just starts being really annoying for your opponent. So just enough cards in that deck end up being allies and care about life gain that do both those things. That I think it's a good enough card. It looked pretty bad, but I think it's actually decent. Kozilek's Channeler is another one which I've been really impressed with. 5 mana, 4/4 taps for 2 colorless. This card it fills a lot of, it checks a lot of boxes. It's a 4/4 devoid creature, which means that some of these devoid creature decks, even the medium aggressive ones, don't mind it because it can attack for 4. It also powers out cards like, Valakut Invoker. Like having an aggressive black-red deck that has Valakut Invoker in this card is really nice. Kozilek's Channel really picks up some steam there, and it's excellent in the green ramp decks. It just gets you to 8 or 9 mana a lot easier than it would be otherwise.
Yeah, every time I've cast Kozilek's Channeler, and I just always find myself being like, if I untap with this thing, I'm in a great position. Like it's a 4/4, it's huge, it blocks, it attacks, and this set is rife with places to dump your mana. Whether it's Awaken, whether it's some big Eldrazi, whether it's an Invoker of some sort, you just are almost never short on places to dump your mana, and Channeler gives you a whole bunch of it pretty quick in the game.
And lastly is Fire Mantle Mage, the 2/2 that gives all your creatures menace when you play it or another ally. This is just a good aggressive card. It does a good job of getting your creatures through. So far, I think most of the aggressive red decks are just happy to include this, even without going hard on the ally theme.
Now, what about overrated cards? Was there anything that stood out to you as being, people are taking it too high or thinking that it's too great?
Again, this is kind of like where the expectations didn't match, or rather the reality didn't match my expectations. Sheer Drop is one of them. 2 and a white, destroy a tapped creature, Awaken 3 for 5 and a white. The card's still good. You're still going to play this if you draft it, but I thought it was a lot better than I think it is. I think it's just good. I don't think it's great. I thought it was great.
Okay. Why don't you like it? I mean, killing a creature sometimes and getting a dude is pretty good.
No, it is good. It's just that you end up not always getting full value off Awakening, and just trying to set this up is pretty annoying. Like, again, I think it's good. It's just not like super premium.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And overrated, of course, does not mean bad. It has a negative connotation. It's just like
underrated didn't mean that we thought Encircling Fissure was crap. It's just like Encircling Fissure went up in my estimation, and Sheer Drop went down.
There you go.
And I think I had those two cards pretty close together when we first looked at the set.
All right.
Lastly, Unnatural Aggression, the 2 and green fight card that exiles. Mm-hmm. This is, I think, just the worst fight variant we've seen in a long time. And the green fight card is always decent, like Wild Instincts, Epic Confrontation, Savage Punch. Unnatural Aggression, I think, is just a step below all of those, just in how it plays. Because it doesn't give any sort of power and toughness bonus, and it costs 3 mana, so it doesn't have the efficiency of Prey Upon, which was just fight for a 1 green, or the stats that all these other cards have granted. So just setting it up is not always the easiest.
Yeah, what you get for that mana is instant speed, but you're saying you haven't found that to be the difference maker.
Yeah, so I overall, I mean, and it exiles, which does help, but the green decks don't actually care about that all that often, just the blue-green one maybe. So in general, you're going to play this card. Again, you're going to take it. It's like Sheer Drop. It's not that like these cards are bad, but it's just not premium. It's not, I don't think it's like the best green common right now. I'd have to draft a little more to really, get a firm opinion, but I haven't been super impressed with it.
Okay. Well, good stuff. That was fun. Yeah, we're both kind of feeling out the format, and we're going to keep doing it as we go along, work research and such. And we'll be writing along.
Look, it's what is the show? Dirty Jobs. It's a dirty job, but someone has to do it.
Yeah, we will be the hapless volunteers to do a bunch of drafts to help you improve. But format looks cool so far. It's complex. There's a lot going on, And that's always fun. If you feel like after the first week or two that you've kind of already got a good handle on things, that doesn't necessarily bode well for a month from now. But this one, in my mind, is very up in the air. I think all of these cards are going to be shifting around as we move forward. And that's exciting. That's part of the fun of it. That's part of what Luis and I love about Limited and what makes doing the show fun as well, is when things change around and we get to come in and hang out with you guys and chat about it. That will do it for the show this week. If you want to find us on social media, I am Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can also send us an email at lr@lrcast if you have something a little bit longer than 140 characters. You can find everything related to the show that we talk about on here, including links to our streams, to Patreon, everything I've mentioned, the LRcast subreddit. If you want to chat with other like-minded Limited players in a safe and cool community, you can find that too, all at lrcast.com. I also want to remind you that Limited Resources is brought to you by channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out for a whole slew of awesome free content and a full selection of singles, sealed product, and supplies. Channelfireball.com. That will do it for the show this week, though. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we'll talk to you next week.
So the topic of Rolling Thunder has reminded me of what are the most ridiculous cards in Limited? I mean, people love lists. I love lists. I mean, who doesn't love lists?
I love a list.
Top 5 list is a great list. And as unpleasant as it may be to get your whole team Rolling Thunder, there are better cards in Limited. So I just wanted to mention the kind of what I have as the top 5 of cards in Limited. Though, I don't know if it's good or bad that a couple of these cards are from the last year, and a couple more from the last couple of years. So, that's a thing. We're gonna go ahead and start with Gideon Jura. This is a 3 white Planeswalker Gideon, and starts at 6 loyalty. You can -2 Gideon to kill a tapped creature. You can +2 Gideon to make all your opponent's creatures must attack Gideon, and then you can pay 0 loyalty to make Gideon into a 6/6. So specifically, I actually want to mention Gideon in M12 because context definitely matters. There are cards, which have appeared in a format and been unbeatable, and appeared in other formats and been just very good instead of unbeatable. And as it turns out, Gideon in M12 was just basically unbeatable, whereas Gideon in Rise of the Eldrazi wasn't, even though he was very good there too.
Yeah, Drana was the best card in Rise, right?
I think so. I think Drana was the best card in Rise.
I think so too, yeah.
Though I think Emrakul might have been better because it is 15-15. But, when looking at what are the best cards in Limited, I kind of think, what are the cards that increase your wins by the most if you just got to add them to your deck? Mm-hmm. And I think in M12, adding Gideon Jura was, one of the best cards of all time you could add. Just because there's no easy answers to it.
Unbelievable in that format.
Right, you play, if they had a big creature that was tapped, you play Gideon and kill it. If they had a big creature that was untapped, you +2 Gideon, chump block, and then kill it because they had to attack. If they had a bunch of small creatures and you had decent ones, you +2 Gideon, they just have to run all their creatures into yours and you get to kill them. So there's just no situation where Gideon wasn't great. And if they have no creatures, you can send Gideon in at them. It's a 6/6.
Yeah, he was unbelievable.
Not the only card that costs white mana, or in fact 3 white, Wingmate Rock, which we just got to play with in cons. I think is the next one. Wingmate Rock, white 3, white 3 for a 3/4 flyer that gains you a life every time you attack. For each creature that attacks. That's already pretty good. You would all play that card. Mm-hmm. The fact that if you attacked it in raid and gave you another 3/4 means that Wingmate was one of the cards that I think took you from losing to winning the fastest.
That card was unreal.
First of all, if you were already winning, this card just sealed the deal. There's no way your opponent's going to come back if you're already ahead and then you play Wingmate Rock. Second of all, if you were losing, you could sometimes just sneak or even just, suicide a creature in and then play Wingmate Rock, and then all of a sudden the board was stable because you had 2 3/4 flyers, one of which you don't mind blocking with at all, the other of which, if it gets to attack, is going to gain you 2 or 3 life. And I think that Wingmate Rock just, again... Look at these cards that take you from, losing positions to winning positions. That's a really big part of it. We talk about that a lot. Plus, just the power level of these cards is just absurd.
Yeah, it was only 5 mana. It also, you mentioned Raid, but Raid ended up being kind of trivially easy to get triggered. It wasn't, I remember thinking before the set, are we going to have Raid when we want Raid, for all the cards? And it ended up just being super easy.
Right. You could evaluate the Raid cards as if they just had that ability, 85% of the time or something.
Yeah.
So, Wingmate Rock on the list. Next up, Fate Reforged, the Citadel Siege. This card.
Oh, God.
2 white, and when you play it, you just conjure dragons. And at first it's like, well, yeah, you choose dragons, you get to tap down a creature every turn. That's pretty good. You choose cons, you get 2+1 counters. Oh wait, this card's just not remotely beatable. If you could play this, it basically what it asked of you is if you have a creature out and you can name cons, you're going to win the game very easily because
that's what it did.
Your creature gets bigger, they can't block it. Next turn, you either play another creature to spread it out, or just keep dumping on the same creature. And that's not even keeping in mind that if you're behind, you can actually name dragons and start tapping their best creature down every single turn. A card that was 2 white at the start of your opponent's turn combat to tap one of their creatures, that would be an incredibly good card. This card, that's the worst version of this card.
Yeah.
That's the bad side.
That was the bad end of the spectrum for it. And it was an enchantment, which made it especially difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Is like, look at these cards so far. How do they interact with the removal? Well, Gideon's basically impossible to kill. Wingmate Rot takes multiple removal spells. Citadel Siege is impossible to kill. And that's just the reason that these cards... Citadel Siege asks nothing of you besides having a creature out and paying 4 mana, or not having a creature out and just getting to tap their creature every turn. And that's the fail case. So it was just one of the cards that if you could add a Citadel Siege to your deck, then your win percentage would just increase dramatically. Not as much as Pack Rat, though. Pack Rat's the next one.
Oh, this is the one, man.
Yeah.
This might be the best limited card ever.
I don't think it is. I think it's the second best. Okay. This is number 2 on my list.
There's one worse. Okay, interesting.
So Pack Rat, it's 1 in a black, and its power total equal the number of Pack Rats you have. And you can pay 2 in a black and discard a card to make another Pack Rat. The key is, if your opponent didn't kill this, if you played this turn 2, especially on the play, once you made a second Pack Rat, even if your opponent killed the first one, the second one could make more Pack Rats.
Yep.
And it's basically impossible to race. Yes, it starts out as a 1/1, then it becomes then you have 2 2/2s, then 3 3/3s, then 4 4/4s, and then the game's pretty much over. I actually had Pack Rat at back-to-back sealed GPs, actually along with Mizzy Mortars in both those GPs.
I covered both of those.
I did top 8 both those GPs.
You sure did. One of them was Philly, right?
Yeah, one was Philly where we got stuck.
Where we got stuck there forever. Yeah.
And then the other was Indianapolis. And I have to tell you, Pack Rat, if you cast it, you just always won. I mean, there's Owen actually did get to syncopate my Pack Rat once, but luckily I had Mizzy Mortar still. And in general, if you cast Pack Rat, your opponent has 1 turn to deal with it, and then they can't kill it and they can't erase it. The only time you can beat Pack Rat is if they draw it much later in the game, or if you just have some kind of absurd draw that involves a lot of very swingy cards, Detention Sphere or a Wrath of some kind. And there are also very few answers to Pack Rat on the play. There's 3 cards or something.
It was I think it was Ultimate Price, Golgari Charm, something.
And Electricity. Those are
Electricity, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's not a lot of cards in a format.
But what is going to beat Pack Rat on this list?
Yeah, it's... the card's going to beat Pack Rat is Umezawa's Jite.
Okay.
And I have some reasons for this. I've thought about this topic probably way more than I need to. But Umezawa's Jite is 2 mana for an equipment. You pay 2 to equip it. When the equipped creature deals damage, and no, this isn't deals damage to a player. This isn't deals damage when it attacks. This is just deals damage. So whether it attacks, whether it blocks, anytime it deals combat damage, rather, sorry. It has to be in combat. But anytime it deals combat damage, you get 2 counters on the Jite. You then remove a counter to give a creature -1/-1, or give the equipped creature +2/+2, or gain 2 life. This card's very strange. The first time I read the card, I thought, okay, this is probably pretty good.
That's even when you read it now, I still just think, it's fine.
Right.
It's unreal.
Part of it, I think, is our brains think, when this hits the player, because a lot of cards like this are worded that way. And part of it is just because the card's so weird. So I opened this card at the Champions of Kamigawa pre-releases from Champions. Put it in my deck because it looked like it was going to be good. The first time I drew it, I looked at the board, I looked at the GT, I looked back at the board, and I'm like, wow, I'm just going to win the game. And I was like, wait, is this the best card I've ever seen? It turns out it is. Because literally the first time I equipped it was on a 1/2 creature. I attacked with it. My opponent blocked the 2/2, so my creature died. I then killed my opponent's 2/2 by giving it -1/-1. Next turn I equipped it on a 2/2 and attacked. My opponent didn't have a 4/4, because I could make my creature into a 4/4 by giving it +2/+2, and then it could start picking off my opponent's creatures, getting 2 counters every single turn, and it gains a bunch of life, so your opponent can't even race it. And it's only 2 to equip, so you can put it on a creature, attack, get 2 counters, then move it on to another creature, and they can't attack back.
And it's colorless.
It's a colorless artifact.
For 2.
This was in a format where there was exactly one main deckable artifact removal card and maybe like 1 to 2 sideboard artifact cards.
Oh my God.
So your opponent could never kill it and they could never win. And,
well, you did it.
Yeah.
you found the card better than Pack Rat.
You could be losing badly on this card to get you out of it because it immediately gains you 4 life or distributes 2 -1/-1 counters the turn you play and equip and attack with it. And then if you have enough creatures so you can re-equip on defense, there's no way they can attack into it again. So even if it's like your 2 creatures against an army, it's really hard to beat this card. If you're ahead, it's obviously just a joke. And even at parity, it's just not even close. So I think, and I'll stand by Umezawa's Jita being the best card in Limited of all time. So I'm curious if people have challengers, but so far I really haven't heard anything. There's a lot of other good cards, Rolling Thunder, Pestilence, Masticore, Phyrexian Processor. These cards are all fantastic, and maybe some of them go above some of the other cards on this list. I would be willing to buy that. I'm not really going to budge on number 1 though. That's the card, that's the number 1 bullet point on a list that I think the most confident of just about.
Yeah, so, I think you nailed it, dude. Because I never played that format, right? I wasn't drafting. And I have played Pack Rat, and when you said this list, that's the first card that came to my mind. It was the card that everybody hated from the set, and everybody complained about, and your friend would walk up to you after a round, and how did it go? Pack Rat. Okay, you don't need to say anything else. Everybody understood that the card was completely unbeatable, only cost 2 mana, was virtually impossible to deal with, etc. And then you said Jite, and that's a card I've played in Cube, and still underrated it there and realized that it just doesn't matter. That card is absolutely unreal in basically every scenario. Even if your opponent doesn't play creatures, it's still good. It just doesn't matter. Jite is the best, and it is better than Pack Rat. You found it.